What's shaking, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Orange Bloods Texas Football Channel. I'm Geoff. That's Anwar. We're going to be talking about five-star offensive lineman Devon Campbell today. National Signing Day, 1 day away. So we're going to play the hits and talk about what it would mean for Texas to sign a guy that I think would represent their best offensive line signing in 20 years, almost. We're start talking about generations at some point. Before we do, like the video, subscribe to the channel, get notifications, leave your comments in the comment section. Who does Devon Campbell remind you of? Do you think what are your most rock solid opinions on what it means to potentially sign this guy tomorrow? And Anwar, tomorrow is National Signing Day too. The Longhorns have most of their business taken care of. Devon Campbell is at the forefront of everything they hope to do this year. It's really interesting. It felt like the recruiting class outside of Quinn Ewers and whatever ended up happening with his reclassification and then Malik Murphy, Devon Campbell's been the name at the top of the want board for the Longhorns all year long. And what's really interesting is there's a little bit of I don't want to say a thud with a commitment tomorrow. It's just that the Longhorns have done so well on the offensive line recruiting side of things over the course of the last 6 weeks that the level of desperation for Devon Campbell isn't quite. They're desperate for as many five-star offensive linemen as they can get, but that they have a base and he's not alone, and that they could survive a Devon Campbell decision to go elsewhere. Says a lot about the level of depth that they've put into this recruiting class on the offensive side of the ball, especially at the offensive line. But Campbell's the best of the bunch. He's the guy that I think has a chance to truly be special. And it's just interesting how his waiting until the very end has kind of, I don't know, there's just not a ton of buzz about tomorrow. It feels like even with the stakes so high, with the talent so good, that there's just a little something missing going into signing day. Am I wrong?
Well, I mean, the thing is, Ketch, when you just look at it, I mean, it's almost like a plethora of riches. I mean, it's almost like you have so much food on the table and someone's like, oh yeah, by the way, we're going to bring you this special order steak. And it's like, wow, I've already eaten really good. The Texas already has Kelvin Banks, who was at one point a five-star, and still a five-star in the hearts of all the Longhorn fans, right?
I think he's for some of the networks, he's like a composite five-star, because On3 named him a five-star, and then 24/7, if I'm not mistaken, after all year long not having him as a five-star, it was like everybody looked at Rivals and went, whoa, Rivals is changing him. We need to go the other direction. Kind of weird, but it does feel a little bit like that's happened. But yeah, I think he's technically still a five-star.
Smart. They have Malik Agbo. They have Neto. How do I pronounce his name?
Neto.
Okay. How's his last name?
Neto.
Okay.
He's just going to be Neto U.
Okay, Neto U. We'll notice how to correctly pronounce it at some point. You already had Cameron Williams, that was there. Already had, then Cole Hudson, out of Frisco. You have Connor Robertson, Ketch. So when you look at that list, you're feeling pretty good. Like at that point, that's a pretty damn good haul for any class. And then you're going to say, well, you're just going to throw in one more guy. It's like, oh, okay, sure. But that's what the thing is, I know it's down between Texas and OU as far as Devon Campbell is concerned, or Devon Campbell. Still need to get the correct pronunciation of his name. So, but I viewed it as one of the things I wrote in my Sunday column. If they don't get him for some odd reason and he does go to OU, it would be a loss. But it won't be devastating loss. It won't be the thing that you look at and go, my God, this staff, it's
weird. I think we should, if that were to happen. You're right. I don't think we will, but Campbell, it's so strange that I think Campbell is the single best player in this recruiting class. He is arguably the best player, period, in this class, regardless of position. I mean, if we included Ewers and we included Cade Klubnik, and we wanted to include everybody, Harold Perkins, whatever, like this dude doesn't take a seat back to anybody. And I think the moment he shows up in August, or actually in June, he will be immediately the best player on the offensive line. And in the history of me doing this, I've never said that about a freshman offensive lineman. So it's weird. I think that there is this, you're not desperate for him, but you kind of are. Because, boy, if there's a team desperate to have a best offensive lineman on the team, certifiably, that's our best guy. He's an anchor. He's as good as anybody. He's going to play all season. This is a guy that has a chance to be that guy. I kind of think we need to turn on the Prince tomorrow. If he, as expected, picks Texas, I think it's got to be like 1999 all day long. But it's not, and that's the part that I'm mentioning, is I feel like there almost should be a parade. And I don't know that that's going to be the reaction, even though we're talking about a guy I think is truly special.
Yeah, but I still don't necessarily think it ends up being the life and death that I think this program has been in. I think maybe it's just as simplistic as the offensive line recruiting has been so bad for so long. It's you look at this and say, okay, I'm good. It's like going gambling. And then at some point you get up at Vegas and you're just like, man, I am good. I'm going to take my money. I'm going to go out and buy some drinks. I am good. That's how I feel about it. Yes. I mean, everything you say about Devon or DC, I'm going to call him until I know how to correctly pronounce his name. Everything I know about DC seems he's obviously great. But I won't view it as like, oh my God, only because I feel like losing the Brockermeyer twins last year, that to me was like a gut punch. Like you needed offensive linemen, two of the top guys in the state, Texas ties, you don't get them. That to me was just the ultimate that kicking the where. This one, I think it would be disappointing, but then you would still go, well, you still got some other guys that are left. To your point,
you know what? Them dudes ain't on his level. I'm just
get it, but the Sarkisian and staff won't be failures if they don't get him. I won't view it that way. I won't view it.
Because you'd still have one of the best offensive line classes in the country. But if we're going to keep it real, let's forget about Campbell for a second. If we look at the mathematical probabilities of these players and what the expectations should be coming with this group. So they've got 6 right now. For me, you look at a guy like Kelvin Banks, and he's separate from him and NATO together. The math says one of those guys is going to hit and one of those guys probably won't. That's not me giving an opinion. That's just saying at their rankings. And I view Banks as a 5-star and NATO as a borderline 5-star. The probability is that one hits and something happens to the other guy. When you look at the other guys, Agbo, Cameron Williams, Cole Hudson, Connor Robertson, the math says you're going to hit on one if you're lucky at a high level. So while we're talking about a 6-man clash right now, the probabilities that exist statistically say that 2 out of that 6 probably hits at a high level, good enough to turn into Sunday players. I mean, we've seen enough low 4-star guys to know you don't get too high on them. Cole Hudson, as much as we might like him, Connor Robertson, as much as we might like him, Malik Agbo. You'll be lucky to get one hit out of those 3. That's got to be the goal. One of those 3 turns into a high-level player. So realistically, with this offensive line class, you hit 2, 3 would be great. What Campbell does is, for me, is changes the math on everything. You add Banks, who I don't want to say anybody's ever a lot, because a guy can get hurt, a million things can happen to sidetrack talent. But you add him to the mix, and then I think the math from this class turns into you expect to hit 3, and maybe you hit 4. And now we're talking about the best offensive line class in the history of the school. You miss him, and now you're expecting 2, and you're hoping for 3. And I don't know that there's any guarantees on that. It's weird. I think this is a really, 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 really big deal. And I'm just kind of, again, it's probably not even a thing that I should mention first. What I should mention is he's a really, 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 really big deal. It's just that, man, if I go to Orange Bloods right now and I click on the Inside the 40 Acres message board, I just typed in the word Banks. How many times do you think it should? And I've got 50 threads on the first page. Or I just did a search on the word Campbell on the message board the day before he announces. We have to, play this little guessing game here. On a word search on Orange Woods, how many would you expect the day before signing day for a 5-star offensive lineman's name to be featured on posts on the message board?
25.
At least a few, right? 10.
There's no one else they're going to sign.
What time is Campbell announcing? How good is Campbell? Can Campbell play left tackle? There should be threads all over the message board. And yet I just typed in Campbell into my word search on the 40 Acres. Zero. There's zero. That's not to say that there's zero discussion of Campbell, but it's to make the larger point. There's not like this overwhelming buzz about what I think is such a huge deal. It's just weird for me. I wouldn't have guessed this a year ago. A year ago, I would have guessed pins and needles. I would have guessed anxiety levels up to here in a battle against Texas and OU. Now you head to the decision, and it kind of feels like Oklahoma isn't expecting anything. They're not getting their hopes up. It's just all strange to me that a guy's recruitment who everybody is obsessed over for 2 years, there's just not a level of obsession at the end. And recruiting, in theory, is supposed to be all about obsession.
But I mean, he's a guy that has been crystal balled by just about everybody to Texas.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's not a lot of suspense that is going on. And so, I mean,
should we fake it?
Well, I tell you what, anyone who did a crystal ball, they better sure as hell hope so. You better sure as hell hope like hell that, something crazy doesn't happen at the midnight hour.
I may retire if he doesn't go to Texas.
Oh, man.
Because everybody would be mad at me. Like, everybody has a future cast or a crystal ball in for Campbell to Texas. But if he actually picked Oklahoma, the only person that anybody would be mad at is me. And that's not me having a pity party. There would be a number of Ketch is not allowed to make predictions anymore posts.
Yeah, even though Cole crystal balled it like months ago. Yeah, it would definitely. So I think people know having the belief that this thing is a done deal, reading that this thing is a done deal. It seems to be a formality, kind of feeling good about where the offensive line was after the haul in December. I think it's easy just to look back and say, all right, what is it tomorrow, 4:00 on Wednesday? All right, cool. Well, we'll go ahead and see that little formality. Is Sarkisian going to say anything and kind of shoulder shrug it? I think everyone's taken for I don't want to say taken for granted because we haven't heard anything about an OU push. The guy's going to Texas. Now, if he does, like I said, the crazy thing happens, shoot, get ready for a meltdown on Orange Bloods. But I think that's why people are taking a more lackadaisical approach to it.
If we faked it, there'd be all we had to do is fake that there's drama involved, and this video would get 2 times the number of viewers.
Yeah, of course, all the people say is it's clickbait. and we're just stirring the pot. And,
we should do that. We should, the day before, like text somebody. Just text somebody and be like, get the word out. Wink, wink. There's a last minute phone call or the like you say something that's truthful, but like very vague. Like, we're hearing the family had a meeting.
Oh, Jesus.
The family had a, like, it really is. I think you're right. I think that the framing of his decision has seemingly turned it into an anticlimactic kind of situation, which is, I guarantee you there'll be 50 posts tomorrow if he doesn't commit.
Yeah, that'll be the only thing that'll be shocking to me. Then I'm like, what in the hell?
How many guys, freshmen, while we're talking about Campbell and the potential addition to him to this recruiting class? And by the way, if you're watching this video, all day tomorrow, or at least all morning here on the YouTube channel, Anwar and I will have guests. I've got Adam Gorney of Rivals booked. I've got Mike Farrell of Rivals booked. Obviously, Jason Sukamel will be joining us. We're working on a number of other names and surprises. 8 a.m. all the way, maybe to noon, sometime after 11. I don't know. We'll play it by ear, but we're going to turn a big football discussion extravaganza. One of the conversations we'll have tomorrow, I'm sure, is offensive line position. How many do you expect? Like, truly, what's fair to expect from a numbers standpoint? If I tell you first game of the season, X amount of freshman offensive linemen are in the lineup, what's an acceptable number?
I don't want to see more than 2.
Put more than 2 out there, and
I think if we were talking, we got 3 offensive linemen that are freshmen out there. I think we're talking about. I mean, it doesn't mean that they're not good. We're just talking about a lot of growing pains at different positions, learning how to work together. We're not having
with a freshman quarterback.
Yeah, and with a freshman quarterback, so you don't even have the veterans. Sometimes even in these equations, the veterans aren't that great, but they know the system so well. They know the little intricacies that they can help out the young people. But if you're just telling 3 guys to figure it out on their own, I don't love that. I don't want to see more than 2. Give me a third potential rotational piece, but I don't want to see more than 2.
What about by Oklahoma? Change it all for you?
No, it depends on what the record is.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying.
Without knowing the record, like, I'm not going to give you that. I'm just asking, does your 3 offensive lineman rule just carry by just sheer definition over the entirety of the season?
I want 3 veterans. You can give me 2 freshmen. If anything more than that, and this team is not winning a bunch of games. Now, someone might say they didn't win a bunch of games with veterans last year, so what the hell is the difference? And to you, I would say you got a damn good point. Can't dispute it. Not dispute what you're saying. But I just feel like we're at that point. This team's not winning a lot of games. We're talking about building for the future. I mean, we already know it's going to be a rebuild, but you don't want to be an ugly rebuild. I mean, you still want to try to get into that 8-ish win, plateau. Anything but, man, if you tell me, and again, it has nothing to do with these guys and my belief in their talent, but if you're telling me that, this next, the opening day, starting day lineup is going to consist of Neto, Kelvin Banks, and Devon Campbell or DC, I would say, okay, that probably sounds great in 2023 or 2024. I just don't know what that looks like in 2022.
I'll go one step further. I think on opening day, I would be alarmed if more than 1 is starting. And I feel like we can take to the bank that Junior Angelau and Jake Majors are both going to be in the starting lineup.
Sure.
So 2 of the 5 spots seem pretty rock solid, secure. It really would concern me about the rest of the offensive linemen in the program. Everybody wants to point to this offensive line that is signing and say, let's get 2, let's get 3 out there, and let's go. Hayden Connor needs to be a guy. Like what can't happen is that Kyle Flood and the either renders the rest of this group moot or that's just the way that it goes. But there got to be some other good players in the program along the offensive line besides just, they need Andre Carrick to be good. And now Andre Carrick's about to enter his third year. Hayden Connor's about to be a second-year player. They've got guys that should, on paper, start to be good if the light switch is ever going to turn on. Part of what Flood is supposed to be dynamic at is a player development guy. It would have been a disaster to say upon his arrival, all those guys that he inherits, none of them ever really become dependable. And it's going to take his guys in recruiting. I think he's got to be better than that. And so I think that one of the storylines that if this team's going to take steps forward, they can't wait for the offensive line to start to look promising in August. Like, hey, all the young guys showed up and boy, now the offensive line isn't a complete mess. I think they need one. If this thing's going to work out, for me, Campbell starts as a true freshman. He's the best guy. You hope that in game one, those guys get to play, but you're starting veteran guys that have developed. And then if you get to October in Oklahoma and one of those other true freshmen have just plowed their way through, they're just too good to keep off the field. Okay, that's a win, right? That means you've got two freshmen playing, but they're just too damn good and you can't keep them off. Early on, it really would feel desperate, I think, to be that young on the offensive line, especially with Alabama in week 2. Like, do you really want to throw kids to the wolves? Because Alabama's going to be the wolves.
I mean, here's the deal. I mean, in an ideal world, no. The only issue is I don't know how much of a difference it makes if you throw some of the older guys to the wolves either. I feel like either way,
what has to, like, those guys have to get better. Is there one offensive lineman in the program that's not Jake Majors or Junior Angelau that isn't in this freshman class that you think that guy's going to be an anchor or needs to be an anchor in this program? Christian Jones, Hayden Connor, Carrick, anybody. Like, if I made you pick one, is there anybody that deep down you believe that's going to happen with?
Is going to happen with versus should happen with, right? It's interesting because we had heard so many good things about Christian Jones prior to last season. I mean, a lot of high praise for what he was able to do in practice.
Program was super high on him.
Yeah. And then, it didn't really transpire all the time, throughout the season. I have to go back and look at some of Alex's grades. We heard it same things about Carrick, a lot of high praise for him. And so, I get it. The issue is, it all depends on who Sark feels like this is who he's going to build around and who he feels like this is his future. And the question is, if these guys are even, is Sark going to go with a Sark guy or is he going to go with, a Tom guy? And I would think if things are even, he's probably going to go with the people he's most familiar with, the guys that he's recruited, the guys that he has previous relationship with, feel like they have a higher upside than some of the guys that are, or carryovers that he just may be like, I'm not quite sure. I never recruited you. So,
you keep letting me down, right? It's the thing from a year ago is if this group of players was expected to do one thing, even internally, they didn't think we're going to flame out and have a bad season. Even in October, they lose to Oklahoma and Sarkisian immediately is talking about, I want a rematch. I want these dudes again. And it wasn't, well, let's see how the next couple of weeks. There was an expectation that they were going to be really good. We talk about it with Hudson Carr, and I wonder where else subconsciously, deep down, I wonder where last season and the failures inside of it extend to the players on the roster to the exact point that you're making, which is, boy, if it's even close, philosophically, go with my guy, go with the younger guy, right? The old saying is, if a young guy's even, he's leaving. I've seen a lot of head coaches, though, hesitate on that call. Like, it's easy to say that, and dudes are trying to win games. You know, Tyrone Swoops once upon a time was going to start the season opener in 2016 because it felt like the safer, kind of more prudent thing to do when he was kind of better than Shane Buechele. And, you know, I wonder with this offensive line group, I wonder what philosophically, if Sarkisian will ever talk about it in this offseason. The team will be so young. So much of this year's team will be guys that he did recruit because they're taking 33 in this class. That's a huge number. It's one of the more interesting things about this offseason, and it is the story for me in the backdrop of Campbell's decision tomorrow is what should expectations be? What's the fair thing to ask for? And at what point are you prepared to make potentially the calls that we're talking about, which is go in with youth. And the moment that any of a guy like Carrick or Connor or any of the players that are on that offensive line that are older than the freshmen get passed up, you would expect to lose those players in time. Like, that's when suddenly guys are hitting the portal. And so there's all these little decisions they have to make where it's like, okay, well, if we're going to start this guy over Carrick, if Kelvin Banks is going to start at tackle over Carrick, is that it for Carrick at Texas? Is that it for any of these guys? That's part of the decision-making process in place. And I think the expectation is these freshmen are so talented, they're going to force those decisions to be made. I think it's imperative over the course of the next 5 months or so that light switches flicker on. I have hopes for Christian Jones. Like, I still think that guy, there's a Sunday player in that guy. Not a Sunday first-round pick or a starting level player in the NFL, but I still think there's an NFL player in Christian Jones. I kind of think that about Andre Carrick. Like, I think he has that kind of ceiling for the next 6 months, 5 months, 4 months, however you want to frame it. They're Kyle Flood's guys. It's up to those players to not have themselves marginalized by the time the freshmen hit. Like, they got to start creating some soft spots in the heart of Kyle Flood. Like, oh man, I kind of love me some Andre Carrick because of what Carrick does and shows him. And I just think it's interesting because I don't know that many of these guys have done that yet in the first year that he's been on campus. If it's ever going to happen, boy, to me, it has to happen real soon.
All right. Well, I've got nothing to add to that other than we need to make sure we just mute our Slack channels when we do these videos.
We're going to mute the Slack channel. I did a good job of blocking that out. Do us a solid. Don't mute your comments in the comments section. Let us know. Talk freshman offensive lineman, talk Mr. Five-Star Campbell himself, who makes his decision tomorrow. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. For Anwar and myself, thanks for watching the channel. We'll talk to you tomorrow. A lot later.